The psychology of people who don't post on social media. Let me tell you something most people will never admit out loud. In a world where everyone is performing, the person who refuses to step on stage holds a kind of power that terrifies the rest. We live in an age of constant display. Every thought shared, every moment documented, every emotion packaged for consumption. The digital theater is always open, and most people are desperate for their turn in the spotlight. But then there are those who stay in the shadows, not because they're afraid, not because they have nothing to say, but because they understand something the masses don't. Visibility is a liability. And silence, real strategic silence, is the sharpest weapon you can wield without anyone knowing you're armed. You see, when everyone around you is broadcasting their location, their intentions, their vulnerabilities, and you remain invisible, you're not just opting out of a trend. You're collecting intelligence. You're studying the battlefield while everyone else is busy painting targets on their own backs. This isn't about being antisocial or technologically resistant. This is about tactical superiority. Because in a world obsessed with being seen, the one who watches without being watched controls the game. And if you've ever chosen silence over spectacle, if you've ever scrolled without posting, observed without commenting, you already know what I'm talking about. You felt that quiet advantage, that sense of knowing more than you reveal. That's not introversion, that's strategy. The psychology behind people who don't post runs far deeper than preference or personality type. It's rooted in something Machiavelli understood centuries ago. The person who reveals everything has nothing left to negotiate with. Your mystery is your currency. Your privacy is your fortress. The moment you make yourself fully known, you become predictable. And predictable people are controlled people. They're the ones who get outmaneuvered, manipulated, and discarded because everyone already knows their next move. But when you withhold, when you keep your cards close, when you let others fill in the blanks about who you are, you become a puzzle they can't solve. And people are obsessed with what they can't figure out. Think about it. The loudest people online are rarely the most powerful. They're performers seeking validation, approval addicts who need constant reassurance that they matter. Every post is a plea. Every update is a confession of insecurity. They're telling you exactly what they want you to think of them, which means they're easy to read, easy to predict, easy to exploit. But you, if you stay quiet, you become a question mark, and question marks are dangerous. They make people nervous. They make people careful. Because when someone doesn't know what you're thinking, they can't anticipate your actions. They can't box you into a category. They can't dismiss you or manipulate you as easily. Your silence forces them to guess, and in that guessing, you hold all the leverage. Now let's talk about what really happens. When you stop posting, you stop feeding the algorithm of social expectation. You stop training people to have opinions about your life. Most people don't realize that every time they post, they're handing out ammunition. They're giving others material to judge, to envy, to resent, or to use against them later. You share your success, someone plots to undermine it. You share your struggles, someone sees weakness. You share your relationships, someone waits for the cracks. Social media isn't connection, it's surveillance. And the ones who don't post are the ones who have figured out they're being watched. There's a concept in power dynamics called information asymmetry. It means that the person who knows more while revealing less has the upper hand. In negotiations, in relationships, in office politics, the one with hidden knowledge controls the outcome. When you don't post, you create that asymmetry deliberately. You know what's happening in other people's lives because they're broadcasting it, but they know nothing about yours. You see their patterns, their insecurities, their alliances, their mistakes. Meanwhile, you remain a cipher. This isn't paranoia. This is tactical awareness. And it's how you stay 3 steps ahead without anyone realizing you're even playing the game. Psychologically, people who refrain from posting often exhibit traits that align with what researchers call Machiavellianism. Not the cartoon villain version, but the real thing. High impulse control, low need for social approval. Strategic thinking, emotional detachment when necessary. These aren't flaws. These are survival skills in a world that punishes honesty and rewards performance. The person who doesn't post isn't socially awkward. They're socially calculated. They've learned that every piece of information you give away is a piece of power you lose, and they're not willing to trade power for likes. Here's what the masses don't understand. Silence is not passive. Silence is active observation. While everyone else is talking, you're listening. While they're performing, you're analyzing. You notice who aligns with whom, who's faking happiness, who's desperate for attention, who's insecure enough to overshare, and all of that becomes data. Data you can use, not maliciously, necessarily, but strategically. Because when you understand people better than they understand themselves, you can navigate around their blind spots. You can avoid their traps. You can position yourself in ways they'll never see coming. Let's address the obvious question. Doesn't staying off social media make you irrelevant? Doesn't it mean you're not building a brand or a network? Only if you're naive enough to believe that influence requires performance. Real power has never been about who shouts the loudest. It's about who holds the strings. The puppet master isn't on stage. The advisor to the king doesn't wear the crown. The person pulling the levers doesn't need applause. They need results. And results come from strategic positioning, not public posturing. You don't need 1,000 followers to have influence. You need the right 5 people to know your value. And those 5 people won't find you through a carefully curated Instagram feed. They'll find you through competence, through quiet reliability, through the reputation you build in rooms where phones are put away. Now, I'm not saying social media has no use. It's a tool. And tools can be wielded or they can wield you. The difference is intention. Most people are used by social media. It shapes their behavior, their self-worth, their perception of reality. But if you're strategic, you can use it without being consumed by it. You can lurk, gather intelligence, understand trends, read the room, all without exposing yourself. You become the observer, not the observed. And in that role, you gain clarity others lack. You see the desperation behind the smiles, the insecurity behind the flexing, the loneliness behind the constant updates. And once you see it, you can never unsee it. You realize that most of what people post is a negotiation with their own inadequacy. And you stop wanting to participate in that negotiation. There's a reason why the most powerful people in the world have minimal social media presence. They're not posting their breakfast or their thoughts on trending topics. They're operating in spaces where real decisions are made, boardrooms, private meetings, encrypted communications. They understand that power doesn't announce itself. It moves quietly, it works behind the scenes, it influences without fingerprints. When you're truly powerful, you don't need to convince anyone of it. Your results speak, your reputation precedes you. And your silence makes people lean in, not tune out. But let's get darker for a moment. Let's talk about what silence really allows you to do. It allows you to be underestimated. And being underestimated is one of the greatest strategic advantages you can have. When people think you're not paying attention, they get sloppy around you. They say things they shouldn't. They reveal alliances, fears, ambitions. They assume you're harmless because you're quiet, and that assumption becomes your weapon. You're gathering intelligence while they're dismissing you. You're building a map of the social landscape while they think you're just scrolling. And when the time comes to make your move, whatever that move is, they never see it coming, because they never saw you as a player. This is the essence of Machiavellian strategy. Appear weak when you are strong. Appear disinterested when you are calculating. Let others underestimate you while you quietly position yourself for victory. The person who doesn't post, who doesn't engage, who seems absent, is often the most present. They're watching everything. They're noting every misstep, every alliance, every crack in the facade. And they're patient, because they know that in a world of impulsive oversharing, patience is a superpower. Now let's talk about emotional control. One of the key traits of people who don't post is their ability to separate their self-worth from external validation. This isn't just healthy, it's ruthless. Because when you don't need approval, you can't be controlled. Think about how much power the fear of judgment has over people. They won't speak up in meetings because they fear looking stupid. They won't pursue opportunities because they fear failing publicly. They craft their entire lives around what others might think. But when you've trained yourself not to need that validation, you become free. Free to take risks others won't. Free to make moves that seem crazy until they work. Free to be ruthless when necessary because you're not worried about being liked. Psychologists call this an internal locus of control. Your sense of worth, your decision-making, your emotional stability, it all comes from within. not from comments or likes or shares. And that internal foundation makes you almost impossible to manipulate, because the primary tools of manipulation are social pressure and emotional leverage. If you don't care what the crowd thinks, social pressure is useless against you. If your emotions are regulated and private, emotional leverage doesn't work either. You become a fortress, and fortresses don't fall easily. Here's something most people won't tell you. The reason they want you to post, to share, to be visible is because it makes you manageable. Societies, corporations, even friend groups, they all function more smoothly when everyone is transparent. When everyone's cards are on the table, because transparency creates predictability, and predictability creates control. But the moment you withhold, the moment you go dark, you disrupt that system. You become the unknown variable. And unknown variables are threats to established order. That's why people get uncomfortable when you don't post. They'll ask if you're okay. They'll wonder if you're hiding something. They'll try to coax you back into visibility. Not because they care, but because your absence creates uncertainty. And uncertainty makes them feel less secure in their own position. Let me give you a framework. In game theory, there's a concept called information advantage. The player who has more information than their opponent has a higher probability of winning. Every time you post, you're giving away information. Your location, your mood, your priorities, your relationships, your weaknesses. Meanwhile, if you're not posting but you're still observing others, you're gaining information without giving any away. Over time, this imbalance compounds. You know their patterns. They know nothing of yours. And when a conflict arises, when competition emerges, when you need to outmaneuver someone, that information gap is the difference between winning and losing. This is why silence is not weakness. Silence is strategic accumulation. You're building a database of human behavior while keeping your own behavior encrypted. And in a world where everyone is an open book, being a locked vault makes you invaluable to some and terrifying to others. Both reactions work in your favor. The ones who value you will protect you because they recognize your rarity. The ones who fear you will avoid confrontation because they don't know what you're capable of. Either way, you win. But here's the part that requires discipline. Staying silent, staying invisible, it's not easy, especially when you see people getting attention for mediocrity, when you watch someone less competent than you get praised because they're loud about it. The temptation to step into the light, to correct the record, to show what you're really made of, it's strong. But that temptation is a trap. Because the moment you step into the light to prove yourself, you've already lost. You've shown that you care about their perception. You've revealed that their opinion has power over you. And once they know that, they can manipulate you with it. The truly strategic mind resists that urge. They let others have the spotlight. They let others take credit, even because they know something deeper. Recognition is not the same as power. You can be recognized and powerless, or you can be unknown and unstoppable. History is full of people who worked behind the scenes, who shaped outcomes without ever being named, who built empires while others built brands. Those are the people who understood that legacy isn't about being remembered by the masses. It's about the impact you have on the structures that matter. Now, does this mean you should never post? Not necessarily. There are times when visibility serves a purpose, when you need to signal something specific to a specific audience, when you're building a particular kind of influence that requires public presence, but even then, it should be calculated. Every post should have a purpose beyond validation. Every share should serve a strategic goal. And most importantly, you should never post from a place of need. Need makes you sloppy. Need makes you vulnerable. Post from a place of abundance, of choice, of strategy. Or don't post at all. Let's talk about relationships for a moment. One of the hidden advantages of not posting is that it filters your social circle naturally. The people who stick around when you're not visible, when you're not entertaining them with updates, those are the people who value you for substance, not spectacle. They're the ones who check in without needing a reason, who remember you without reminders. And those relationships, rare as they are worth more than 1,000 shallow connections built on digital performance. Because when things get difficult, when you need real support or real loyalty, it's not your follow account that shows up. It's the handful of people who know you beyond the screen. Strategically, this is crucial. Your inner circle should be small, loyal, and competent, not large, performative, and flaky. Quality over quantity isn't just a cliche. It's a survival principle. In power dynamics, a tight circle is a protected circle. The more people who know your business, the more vulnerabilities you have. The fewer people in your trusted network, the fewer leaks, fewer betrayals, fewer complications. And the people who don't post, they naturally cultivate this kind of circle, because they're not trying to be everyone's friend. They're trying to build something real with the few who matter. Here's a psychological insight that changes everything. The need to post is often driven by what's called external validation dependency. It's a conditioned response where your brain has learned to associate sharing with reward. You post something, you get likes, your brain releases dopamine, and the cycle reinforces itself. Over time, you become dependent on that loop. You start to feel anxious when you haven't posted in a while. You start measuring your worth by engagement metrics. You become a slave to the algorithm, both the platforms and your own brains. But when you break that cycle, when you go cold turkey on the validation loop, something remarkable happens. Your brain recalibrates. You start finding satisfaction in things that don't require an audience. Your sense of self stabilizes, and you become psychologically independent. That independence is freedom, and freedom is power. The masses are addicted to the scroll, the like, the share, the comment, and addictions are exploitable. Corporations know this, governments know this, anyone with an agenda knows this. But if you're not addicted, if you've broken free from that cycle, you're no longer part of the herd. You're outside the system. And being outside the system means you can see it clearly. You can see how it manipulates, how it controls, how it profits from people's need to be seen. And once you see it, you can choose whether to engage on your terms or not at all. Let me give you a practical example. Imagine two people competing for the same promotion. One is constantly posting about their achievements, their work, their ideas. The other is silent online, but highly competent in person. Who do you think is more likely to be trusted with sensitive information? Who's more likely to be seen as stable, reliable, discreet? The one who can keep their mouth shut. The one who doesn't need to broadcast every win. Because in professional environments, especially at higher levels, discretion is valued more than visibility. The people making real decisions don't want someone who's going to post about it later. They want someone who understands that some things stay in the room. And if you're known as someone who doesn't post, who doesn't gossip, who keeps things close, you become that person. You become trusted. And trust in the right circles is worth more than popularity. Now let's address the fear. The fear that if you're not visible, you'll be forgotten. That fear is real, but it's also a lie sold to you by platforms that profit from your content. You are not your online presence. Your value doesn't evaporate because you stopped posting. In fact, for most people, their value increases when they stop performing and start producing, when they stop curating and start creating. Real-world results, real relationships, real skills, these things don't require documentation to exist. They exist because you built them. And the people who matter will notice, not because you announced it, but because they experienced it. Here's the Machiavellian truth. The world is not a meritocracy. It's a theater of perception. And most people are so busy managing their image that they forget to build actual competence. But you, if you're smart, you do the opposite. You build competence in silence. You develop skills no one sees. You create value that doesn't need a press release. And when the moment comes, when opportunity or crisis arrives, you're the one who's actually prepared. Not because you talked about preparing, but because you did the work while everyone else was talking. There's a concept called strategic invisibility. It's used in intelligence, in warfare, in corporate espionage. The idea is simple. The less visible you are, the more freely you can move. You're not being tracked. You're not being targeted. You're not being countered. You can observe, adapt, and strike without interference. And while that sounds extreme, the principle applies to everyday life. When you're not broadcasting your plans, people can't interfere with them. When you're not announcing your goals, people can't discourage you or compete with you prematurely. You get to work in peace, and peace, uninterrupted focus, is where mastery is built. Think about the people you actually respect, not the influencers, not the performers, but the people you genuinely respect. Chances are they're not the loudest. They're the ones who show up, who deliver, who don't need credit but somehow always seem to be involved in things that matter. Those people understand that real influence is quiet, it's relational. It's built on trust and competence, not content and clout. And if you want to be that kind of person, you have to be willing to let go of the need to be seen and focus on the need to be effective. Let's go deeper into the psychology. People who don't post often have what's called low agreeableness in the Big Five personality model. That doesn't mean they're unpleasant. It means they're not driven by a need to please others. They're comfortable with conflict, comfortable with being misunderstood, comfortable with saying no. And in a world that rewards agreeableness, that rewards going along to get along, being disagreeable is a strategic advantage, because disagreeable people set boundaries. They don't get walked over. They don't waste time on social niceties that don't serve them. They're efficient, focused, and hard to manipulate through guilt or social pressure. This ties directly into not posting. Because posting is, at its core, a form of social appeasement. You're saying, here's something for you to consume, to judge, to react to. Please approve of me. But when you stop posting, you stop appeasing. You stop offering yourself up for judgment, and that makes some people uncomfortable. Good, let them be uncomfortable. Their discomfort is not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to yourself, to your goals, to your strategy. And if that means being the person who doesn't play the social media game, so be it. Here's a harsh reality. Most people are not your allies. They're not rooting for you. At best, they're indifferent. At worst, they're waiting for you to fail so they feel better about their own stagnation. Social media amplifies this. It creates a culture of comparison and competition disguised as connection. Every success you post is a reminder to someone else of what they haven't achieved. Every happy moment you share is a contrast to someone else's misery. And while you can't control how people react, you can control what you give them to react to. By not posting, you remove yourself from that toxic dynamic. You stop being a target for envy, resentment, or schadenfreude. You protect your peace and your position. Now, some will say this is cynical, that not everyone is out to get you. And that's true, but strategy isn't built on best-case scenarios. It's built on preparing for worst-case ones. And in a world where information is weaponized, where screenshots last forever, where context is stripped and narratives are twisted, protecting your information is not paranoia. It's prudence. The person who doesn't post is the person who can't be misquoted, can't be taken out of context, can't have their past dug up and used against them. They're a moving target that's nearly impossible to hit because they've given no one the ammunition. Let me tell you what happens over time when you embrace this approach. You become calm, unshakable, because you're not riding the emotional roller coaster of online validation. You're not checking your phone every 5 minutes to see who liked your post. You're not spiraling because something you shared didn't get the reaction you hoped for. You're grounded, and that groundedness makes you dangerous in the best way. Because while everyone else is emotionally volatile, reactive, distracted, you're clear-headed. You're thinking 3 moves ahead. You're making decisions based on logic and strategy, not emotion and impulse. And that clarity is what separates those who survive from those who thrive. Here's the final insight. The most powerful position you can occupy is the one where people underestimate you while you overdeliver. Where expectations are low but your results are high. And you can't occupy that position if you're constantly announcing your capabilities. If you're always visible, people adjust their expectations. They prepare for you, they counter you. But if you're invisible, if you're underestimated, you have the element of surprise. And surprise, in any competitive scenario, is a decisive advantage. So let them think you're not ambitious because you don't post about your goals. Let them think you're not talented because you don't showcase your work. And then when it matters, when the stakes are real, show them what you're capable of, not online, in reality, where it actually counts. The psychology of people who don't post is not the psychology of avoidance. It's the psychology of control. Control over your image, control over your information, control over your emotional state. It's the refusal to be a product, a performer, or a pawn in someone else's game. It's the decision to operate by your own rules in a world that desperately wants everyone to follow the same script. And if you've made that decision, if you've chosen silence over spectacle, observation over performance, strategy over validation, then you already know what the rest are just beginning to learn. That in a world screaming for attention, the quiet ones are the ones you should fear, because they're not distracted, they're not desperate, they're watching, they're learning. And when the time comes, they'll move with precision while everyone else is still performing for an audience that stopped caring long ago. That's not antisocial, that's not fear, that's power. And power, real power, has never needed to announce itself, it simply is. And those who understand that, those who live that, they don't need to post about it, they just need to be it.